Is being positive really the best thing to find happiness and success? I used to think so, but after today's episode and conversation, I don't know if that's really true. It actually could be very toxic. And this episode, what we're going to talk about is dive into why that is and how can we start to shift our thinking, our mind, and bring in more healing into our life to be able to find more happiness and success. If you've been feeling like you've been having hard times this year, emotions have been all over the place, your turbulence is happening almost every day, and it feels like 2024 has been a year of turbulence and change, this episode is the one you need. So if that's you, keep on listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Today, we have an amazing episode lined up for you. As I promised, I told you a couple episodes ago, we are going to start bringing some more guests on to do really powerful interviews. And, you know, with working with so many different students, I've been seeing a lot of issues pop up, especially as we welcome new students into the program. And I thought the perfect guest to bring on would be Brad Bizjack. He's a success coach, someone I met through our good buddy, James Wedmore's program, has a multi-million-dollar business himself. And, you know, Brad, I actually don't really know your story, but I'm assuming started with nothing and built it up to what you have now. So I'm just going to say that, and you can correct me later if I'm wrong. But welcome to the show, man. I know we're going to have a really good discussion here. It's going to help a lot of people. So I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me. I'm pumped to help people with this stuff. And there's a lot of misconceptions around this topic, and I'm excited to help people out with it.
Yeah, great. Well, let's just kick it off here. Can you tell us just in like 5 minutes or less, like what is your story? How did you get here? How did you fall into this line of work? And then we're going to dive a little deeper into what you do.
For sure, man. So it also, I like to think of it as everything happens for us, not to us. I remember graduating college with a lot of limiting beliefs. Things like money is hard to make. Once you have it, it disappears. And that, you know, if you don't have a lot of money, you can't be happy. Things like I'm not enough. And when I graduated college, I just wanted to change my financial circumstances. That was my big objective at the time. But if I'm being totally honest, what I really wanted at that stage was to be the breaking point of mediocrity in my family history. I wanted to outrun my past. I wanted to feel like I had something to move towards instead of just running away from something. And I found online business, and that was the ticket for me. I saw all these stories of hope and change and freedom, and I wanted that. And I would read the books, I'd listen to podcasts, I would do the courses, but it didn't work. Like it wasn't working for me, even though it was working for everyone else. And I would start to take their success as my failure. And I would remember being on the couch watching Friends reruns, binge eating microwave nachos, feeling sorry for myself with my laptop staring at me, just begging me to change my life. And even though I didn't care, I cared so much. And I slipped into these feelings of depression. And my mentor at the time said, dude, you need a mindset coach because what you're doing isn't working. But I was $92,000 in debt. Luckily, I had the courage to hire that coach. And on our very first call, she said something that changed my life forever. I was telling her how I'm trying all the things. Why the heck isn't it working for me? And she said, Brad, you're so attached to success that you're missing the whole point. You're under the impression that you shouldn't be where you are right now. Business, success, and money isn't going to make you happy. It's rewiring your mind for happiness and for success that will make you successful. And it changed my entire perspective. And so I went all in on learning that. And I remember getting a ticket to a conference to really make this part of me. But the universe is funny because right as we're about to grow, it likes to test you to see if you're for real, right? So the month before I go to this conference, had the plane ticket, had the hotel, had all that stuff, I got fired from my corporate job. And so now I'm $92,000 in student loan debt, no income. I was terrible with money back then, no savings. I remember landing in San Diego to go to this conference with nothing in my bank account. I head to the grocery store to buy peanut butter and jelly because I couldn't afford eating out. And I head back to my bank, to the hotel and check my bank balance like I did 100 times a day at that point. And I overdrafted my bank account on peanut butter and jelly. And I walk into that conference tail between my legs. And the topic that day was all about rewiring your mind, shifting your greatest limiting beliefs, changing your value systems, and how to reprogram what the thoughts and emotions going on inside of you for success. And from everything I learned there, and now what I teach thousands of people all over the world, we were able to create a very successful multi-million-dollar business, retire my wife, all these beautiful things. But most importantly, I recognize that rewiring your mind is the only way to create the success, the freedom, and the fulfillment that you deserve. And now I'm committed to teaching people all over the world how to do that.
I love it. A million questions. The first one I have is, why is that? Like, if you come in, let's just say someone comes into a program and is doing all the tasks, right? And even on paper, it looks like I'm doing the same thing as everyone else. Why is it all of a sudden you see much bigger, better results when you start to rewire your brain, shift your thinking, your perspective? Why is that happening?
Well, most people don't recognize that if you start with the how, you're actually setting yourself up for failure. And most people don't recognize that, because if you start with the how, you naturally are evaluating if you're capable enough to do it. So the stories that start playing in your head are, I'm not good enough, or, this is too hard. It's taking longer than I want it to take, or, I should be further along, or I'll compare myself to other people, or I'll get into a state of like, it has to be perfect, right? And from those stories, my emotions that come from that are pretty negative, things like overwhelm or anxiety on a constant basis. And so even if I have the right strategy and I'm trying to operate that strategy from a state of anxiety or overwhelm, I'm not going to apply it the right way, because the energetics behind it are not aligned with the dream, right? If you think about, like, our mutual friend taught me this, James Wedmore taught me this, that manifestation is the physical representation of your consistently dominant vibration. Right. Well, if you have a dream that is high vibe, but you're operating from a state of low vibration, you can try all day long and effort all day long, but your energy isn't aligned with the dream that you're trying to create. And so successful people do it differently. Successful people reverse engineer, what do I want to create? What's the strategy that will get me there? Awesome. What would I need to believe to effectively do that strategy? Right. And therefore, what emotional state do I need to live in to deploy that?
I love it. Again, it's just like, I love we're going right down the rabbit hole, because again, it's more questions. Every time I hear an answer, it's just more questions. So my next question is this, or let me do this. I see this with our students a lot too. And I want to give an example, and you let me know if I'm on the right track with this, and I just want to break it down for the listeners. The way you just described it is very like energetics, vibration, frequency, which obviously makes sense, and there's a lot of science to back it up. If we were to even look at it in more simple terms, like, here's how I see it like playing out with our students is, for example, they have the desires and the wants for the $1 million business. They're in our programs because they know that they need to work on their messaging or whatever to get to that $1 million business. But I can see, as the coach, things running in their head where it's like, I get on a call and they ask me a question, 2 weeks later I get on a call and they ask me the same question. And it's like, I gave you the answer, you didn't do it, but they're doing other things instead. And they think they're doing the task and they're doing the stuff. Is it like, with the vibration, the frequency, is it also just kind of like the subconscious fears, worries, concerns, stuff are even subconsciously dictating the actions they take? So not only is their frequency and vibration off, but also at the same time, the actions they should be taking are also off, which are one and the same, but you could look at them almost differently. Am I understanding that correctly as well?
100%. I mean, if you think about it, our entire life is controlled by invisible forces, right? Like gravity, too much of it, you're crushed, too little of it, you float away. Love, wars have been started over love. It's an invisible force. Beliefs, subconscious beliefs are an invisible force that dictate your whole life. Because if you have a limiting, toxic thought pattern or belief, well, that's going to leave you tapping into very little potential. Therefore, the action that you take is not aligned with the very best version of you, and it's very low. It's misaligned. And if you take misaligned, uninspired, procrastination-based actions, which is typically a form of perfectionism, right? Fearing that you're not enough or having a belief that you're not enough, then your results that you're going to get are really, really poor. And if you get poor results, it actually reinforces the belief that you already have. And so it's like this
So it's like
It's this.
I'm not good enough, or this isn't going to work, but I'm gonna try it anyways because I want to go for it. But that's really running, and then it doesn't work out. Now that experience reinforced the belief of, oh, I'm not good enough, or it's not going to work out, and then it just creates this loop that gets strengthened over time. Correct?
Yes, and that loop that gets strengthened over time becomes someone's safety, right?
Mm.
Sometimes what most people don't recognize is that their limiting story that they tell themselves is actually a comfort for them. A lot of people, when I ask them, what are you getting out of this belief? Most people are like, nothing. It's terrible. I hate this. I can't stand procrastinating. I can't stand being in perfection all the time. But they're actually getting something out of it because this story they've been telling themselves is actually their form of comfort. And if that's their form of comfort, then your body, your psychology, every bit of you wants to prove that true, because the strongest force in the human personality is the need to stay consistent with who you already think you are.
Wow. Okay. You said one. There's so many directions I want to go, but let's go here. I'm still thinking about that last sentence. That was really powerful. So if you're listening to the podcast, re-listen to that last sentence. You said the word toxic. Mm-hmm. And I know the title of the episode, and I know we were talking beforehand, because I do think one of the things that people do all the time, or not all the time, but I think when they start working on their mindset, they're like, okay, I need to shift the way I'm thinking and looking at things, is they take on a positive perspective on things, which I think is always great. I do believe to my core that every experience we go through life can benefit you in some way if you choose to see it. There's lessons to be learned, there's things, but at the same time, things are also very traumatic. We are emotional beings, and there are healings that need to happen, and traumas and stuff that are playing out inside of everyone's life. We're not immune to it. No one's immune to it. And so I think what people do is they try to always give a positive spin on stuff, which I am guilty of doing. But you brought it to my attention before the episode that sometimes that's not always the best thing to do. Can you go deeper on that and explain why?
Do you have 6 hours?
I do.
I used to do this, right? I was the guy that used positivity as a coping mechanism for my own insecurities and to avoid uncomfortable emotions. A lot of people label them as negative emotions, but as you'll soon see, there are no negative emotions. There's only comfortable and uncomfortable. But the minute we deem it negative, we don't want to feel it. So I think a lot of people, when they think of shifting their psychology or their mindset or beliefs, they think just be positive. But
Right.
when most people do that, they're just avoiding the reality of the circumstance. And I used to do this. I used to just be like, it's fine. It'll be good. It'll all work out. It's fine. And it was just glorified avoidance. If you really want to heal from something, there's a couple things that need to happen. Number one is you need to accept the reality of what is happening around you. There's truth to what's happening around you, and you can't deny that. The second thing is you need to come face to face with the emotions that come from that. Most people, especially in terms of emotions, will suppress. And anything you suppress, like an emotion, is just, think of it like a ball of energy.
Yeah.
It's always wanting to get out so that you can feel this flow of beautiful energy. Well, if you suppress it and push it down, it'll start to, that's where triggers are formed, right? A trigger is just a piece of your heart that hasn't healed yet. That's all a trigger is. And most people avoid healing those things or coming to face with the uncomfortable emotions of what they're facing because it's uncomfortable, and they don't like that, what feels like a threat to their well-being.
Right.
And so they push away those sensations. And what ends up happening is they tend to live in this consistent state of a certain emotion that feels safe to them. A lot of people will, let's say, experience overwhelm. I'm willing to bet if you are an entrepreneur, you've had the lovely experience of overwhelm. And it becomes your home. And here's the thing about your home. If it's messy, you're still going to go back to it, right? And so a lot of people don't recognize that. And what most people do is they take a look at their circumstances around them, and they will just say that makes me feel a certain way. A feeling is triggered by the experience, but you don't have to stay there. So there's actually an acronym that I follow that allows people to actually move through the emotions of something so much faster. Most people just want to skip to the good part, and that's fine and dandy. But if you don't express something, then it's going to be bottled up in you. And that has major consequences over the long term, where you're going to get burnt out or stressed out. And when you get burnt out or stressed out, you'll either shut down or you'll explode. And typically in situations that are inappropriate, like at your kids or at your employees or something. And so that acronym is really simple. It's 5 parts. It's spelled RULER, RULER. The R stands for recognize it. What am I feeling? Simple. The U stands for understand it. Well, is this actually overwhelm or am I scared? Am I scared or am I hurt? Like, what am I actually feeling? The L stands for label it, which is essentially the same thing as the R, just with more information.
Yep.
All of that, those first 3 take about 17 seconds. It doesn't take long at all.
Yeah.
But most people skip the next piece, and that is express it. But express it without consequence. Because if you are feeling the emotion of anger, for example, and you yell at your kids or lash out at your kids, you are expressing the emotion, but it has consequences. It hurts your kids. But you can go scream into a pillow. You can go for a run. You can go to the gym. There's ways to express emotions in a healthy way to get it out of you so it's no longer in you. Most people, everyone's had this experience where you've had a really good cry from bottling things up and you finally let it out and you feel a million times lighter. Right. The reason is because you've expressed the emotion. And the final R is regulate it. That means that's where you choose the gratitude. That's where you find the lesson, the beauty in what you're facing. Because it's what you said is true, that there is beauty in everything you're facing, but you can be in pain and grateful simultaneously.
Right.
Like you can experience something that's harsh and still come alive and still recognize that this is happening for you and not to you. Right. And so that'd be my recommendation for people that are going through that.
Okay. Again, so many different directions. I wrote some notes down to make sure you can cover these different points that I had that popped in my head. Like one of them is just, even for me, even this conversation is bringing awareness to me and how I operate. And one of those things is like, I do use that positive sort of outlook on life where it's like, I really feel this way, but I'm going to look at the good, look at the good, look at the good, look at the good, look at the good. And then that underlying emotion actually never got really addressed, but I feel better in the moment because I just keep my mindset or my thinking on the positive outside of it. My experience with that also is like from what you hear is what you said is when it gets shoved down, not only does it create triggers, but I also believe it creates illness and 100%. Physical pain. Like when you don't have a trauma to your body, like a physical trauma to your body, and all of a sudden you have something like that could be, bottled up emotions. So it's very toxic in that way because you're not actually addressing, healing, becoming whole, right? You're just putting the mask on, like you said. But what I've also noticed is taking that approach when communicating with other people. Like, and there's one instance in my mind that really popped up where I won't say who it was, but someone close to my family got diagnosed with something. And then I automatically went to a positive thing, a positive outlook, positive whatever. And what I found out later was I completely invalidated their experience, was not listening, invalidated it. And it was really toxic and I didn't get it at the time. I was like, how is that toxic? I'm trying to help and blah, blah, blah. And now the bringing of the clarity is like the most helpful thing I could have done in that moment is not try to put a positive spin, but to make that person feel heard and validated and let them get the expression out, which you said was, I think, let's see, was that, I don't know, one of them, right?
The E, express it, yes.
Well, it's almost all of them up until like until the R, but yeah. And so I can see how that's really, really toxic and really, really painful. My question to you is like, when someone goes through something that just hits them on a different level, it's like a new emotional pain or traumatic event that they've never experienced before, and they're not able to like go through the RUL, like, because I think that takes awareness, like, okay, you need to do it. But if it's so overwhelming, what do they do in those instances?
It's a great question. I think a lot of times, let's imagine that success is like taking a road trip and you're on this drive from point A to point B. And when you're on this road trip, like it can rain and you can still drive a car in the rain. That's a metaphor for challenges in life show up. right? And when those challenges in life show up, you can keep going. Absolutely, you can keep going. But sometimes it's a torrential downpour.
Yeah.
And the safer thing to do is to pull over the car in that instance. A lot of people think they just need to keep going, keep going, keep going. When pulling over the car when it's a torrential downpour is actually the smart move, because it allows you time to process and heal instead of try to operate in those moments. And I think what happens a lot of times is, especially the instance you were talking about, I call that an empathic miss, where your intent is pure, the intent is beautiful, but what is so important if you are serving someone or coaching someone or leading someone or parenting someone that's going through a really tough time, it's so important that you have, I call it holding space for somebody, which is where you're not going to a place of solving for them.
Right.
There's a book, you and I are both dads. There's a book called The Rabbit Listened that explains this so well. And it's like this little kid builds up a tower, right? And the birds come and knock the tower down. And the little kid's really upset. And the snake comes by and says, let's go get the guys that knocked it down. And then the bear comes and says, let's go get angry about it and roar about it, right? And then the horse comes and says, okay, well, we're going to fix this and do it again. And the kid wanted nothing to do with it. But then a rabbit came by subtly and quietly. And the kid had no idea the rabbit was there. The rabbit just leaned up against the kid and just was there and just held space for the kid. And the kid talked through. When the kid was ready, the kid talked through, I want to burn it down, or I want to go and do this to the people that hurt me, or I want to do all this stuff. They finally expressed it after they felt safe enough to express. And once they felt safe around that presence of the rabbit, then the kid said, I'm excited to build again. And so it's a great book to any parents, highly recommend it. It's called The Rabbit Listened. But the whole idea is that if someone's going through a really challenging time, to make ourselves feel better, sometimes we feel the need to try to solve for them or be positive about it, when really we just need to hold space and allow someone to express and feel. And so to someone going through that, that's how you solve it when you're the person that's helping. But when you're going through it yourself, it's a whole new ballgame, right? That takes an extreme level of awareness to be able to process these things. And sometimes that healing doesn't happen overnight. I mean, there are things from my childhood with forgiveness and things like that I've had to relearn over and over and over again. And so that is a constant exercise in letting go. And what you'll notice is that when these things come up over and over and over again, there's typically a pattern that shows up. There's a pattern of something in your body. There's a pattern of an expression of emotions or a behavior that you dislike. And once you recognize the pattern and you just zoom out and look at it from an objective perspective and you recognize the pattern, then you can start to find different solutions that are more empowering to be able to process it. But most people's patterns are used as a way to stop them from feeling. One example of this that I'll illustrate just to help people see how this plays out is think about if you've ever had that person where when they call you, your whole body tightens up. Right? And you go into like a state of blame or frustration or anger towards that person. They occupy your thoughts for multiple days or hours sometimes. Well, that's a trigger and it's a sign that healing needs to occur. And so what I would recognize is, where do you go low? Where do you go low consistently when something happens, whether it's a person or a situation or a business result? Where do you go low? And what is your response in going low? And when that occurs, that's a sign that that's where you need to consistently and regularly let those things out and find a more empowering meaning to your pain. One last thing on this that I think will serve everyone here. When you have gone through deep pain, I mean, I've gone through a lot of really tough stuff, abuse, a lot of stuff when I was a kid. And going through that pain, it used to occupy my whole life. And what I didn't recognize is that root actually manifested in me trying to grow a business a certain way, right? Questioning if I'm enough. Think about how that comes out on social media. If it shows up as like craving validation and not genuinely trying to serve, right? As an example. And so I had this deep feeling of I'm not enough from all of that stuff, but from consistently practicing this and letting go and expressing over and over and over again, and finally releasing this, I recognized that all of this, everything I went through, was actually a beautiful gift. It was painful, yes, but pain is guaranteed. Suffering is your choice. When you can recognize the beauty in your pain, the gift in your pain, without the things from my past, there's no way I'd be as empathetic of a person as I am now, where I can see what someone's telling me and be able to see the problem behind the problem. I wouldn't be the dad I am or the spouse I am. And so when you can take an elevated approach and look at painful circumstances as not that they should be different, but they were happening for you, even though they're painful, you can start to find the lesson that's wrapped in pain. And once you find the lesson, you can start to move forward.
Yeah, again, so much to unpack there, and that's been my experience in life too. Is every painful experience or things not going the way I wanted led to more beauty. But I do think for me, everything that I've gone through that's been painful has led to me being able to operate with more love, kindness, and compassion in my heart, which has been a beautiful thing, which has propelled business growth. And being able to understand the students, not get triggered by the students, like remember where I was and what they're going through, and just understand them on a much deeper level. And I want to touch on something you said, which is really important, especially for our listeners, which is because I was the same way. Is I was creating content in the beginning to make up for an insecurity and self-worth issue that I had, which is like, I want eyeballs on me. I want the fame. I want to have 1 million subscribers. I wanted like people to recognize me in the street. And it was like, there was no purity in that. It was all vanity. It was all just for me. And here I am trying to run a business helping other people. And it's like, no wonder it took so long to take off. And this goes back to our original question, is like that I asked you, is everyone does the right things, you're doing the right things, but then the frequency's off, the vibration's off. And I'll tell you this is like a universal truth to me. And we were talking about this before the podcast too. Anytime I go into a launch or promotion and I'm doing it for any other intention other than to serve people, it doesn't do well. If it's like, I'm not involved, or I don't really care, or I just not putting the time and energy in it, or I'm like, hey, we'll just make some quick bucks off of this, it never performs. Never. It's like been a universal truth. And that's why this stuff is so important. My question to you is, well, I have two questions. The first one is, you mentioned recognizing the trigger, recognizing that there is this reaction, there's this maybe response that you have or feeling that you have, and you zoom out, right? That's the language you use. You zoom out. What I have found, and you tell me if you have a different perspective on this. In fact, this happened to me today. When you zoom out, you almost like see that experience and that trigger as something separate from you. Do you have that experience? Is that what you teach people?
100%. Okay. I teach that there's 3 sides to every story. Okay. It's first your experience of the story. Yep. Then when you can adopt compassion for that thing that hurt you or the person that hurt you, and you see what they've been through or what they experienced, doesn't mean it didn't hurt you, but you see it through a different lens, and you go, wow, anyone in that situation would have felt that way. And then I zoom out even further, and I take it from, call it the universe, God, infinite intelligence, source, whatever you choose to believe in, from that perspective. And once I get zoomed out to that perspective, I'm like, holy cow, all that pain was getting me here so that I could deliver this message. It was all exactly as it needed to be. So yes, I absolutely teach that. It's
so beautiful, man. Like, because today I'm just going to make this part about me for a little bit here, because it literally happened to me this morning. Like, I almost want to cry because it was so beautiful. I've cried on the podcast before, but I'll try not to. I'll try not to again.
Go nuts, dude. Safe space.
It was like, it was so great because there was a dynamic that was playing out in one of the relationships in my life. And it was pretty, like, getting to the point where it was pretty toxic, consuming me and consuming the other person. And I just like sat down last night and I was like, why am I like, why do I do that? And I just got curious. And I've always heard like, get curious. And I've always thought about, well, get curious about the other person, not you. And I flipped the question. It was like, get curious about you. Why is that? And it just instantly, saw a vision of when I was a kid. And I saw one of my parents, it was like the exact thing. They said this to me as a kid. And I never thought that, and then they said this to me, and then there was an experience, and I don't want to get into it because it was a pretty messy thing. But I brought back to that moment, and I realized, oh my gosh, the thing that was said to me when I was a kid is literally how I'm operating right now. And it was this trigger. I had no freaking clue. It was like a 1-minute little sentence, and it formed this narrative that's been in my life for years. And when that happened, I was able to separate that experience from the wholeness of who I am and see it as like that's not me. That's who I was told to be and what I was told to believe. And it was like, but boom, it was like, oh, I felt so free, man. It was like, it was unbelievable. And to know that that's what you're doing for other people is like, it makes me so happy to have you on the podcast. And so you're talking to our audience and all of that stuff. How do you know, why does that work? Like, why does separating yourself from that, I don't know, what's so healing in that?
Well, I subscribe to the belief that everything's happening for you and not to you. Now that's
Right.
pretty cliche, right?
Right.
But I can kind of go into the reason why and then elevate into that question a little bit. Pain is such a gift. And that is such a weird perspective, that pain is such a gift. But if we believe that life is happening for us, and I think most people that would listen to a show like this would believe some sort of that life is happening for us, not to us. And easier said than done to live that. But if that's true, then you have to subscribe to the idea that pain is happening for you. And if pain is happening for you, then you'd recognize really quickly that these painful things that happen over and over and over again, it's just the universe's way of getting your attention. Yeah. That's all it is. Same thing with your body. If you have pain in the body, it's the universe, it's your body's way of getting your attention, right? So problems are just gifts wrapped in pain so that you pay attention. And the greatest problem people have is thinking that they shouldn't have problems. Yeah. You absolutely should have problems. And such a gift, because pain will elevate until you let go. And the only way to let go is to recognize that there is a bigger purpose in this. There is a perspective that is higher. And surrender, by the way, that's the common word in yogic science, right? Surrender. Surrender just means that I'm letting go of this. That's all it is. It's I'm letting go. And when you can look at a painful situation that your ego gets so tied up in and choose to remove the ego or elevate above the ego, I'll give one metaphor in a moment that will make sense, and let go, it allows you a different perspective. It burns. You feel the burn of it in your heart. But once you let go of it, it allows you to see it completely differently. And that's what allows, number one, healing. But number two, you to apply a strategy differently or do something differently in your business or career. The metaphor that I like to give with this is it's kind of like if you're getting battered by the storm of life, right? Yeah. And you want to take off. You're in an airplane and you want to take off. And it's raining and it's coming down on you, right? And you can't see the sun so badly. You want to see the sun above you so bad. But planes can take off in the rain. And when you have the courage to take off and elevate and go through the turbulence of the clouds, 100% of the time, when you elevate above the clouds, the sun is always there. And so the reason I'm sharing that is because most people don't recognize that what they're looking for is already there. The problem doesn't need to disappear. You need to elevate above the problem and you'll have what you're looking for.
I mean, that's so beautiful. It's one of the things I was telling my wife a while ago, was like, through the personal development journey I've gone on, intentionally have gone on, I guess we're always still learning whether we're intentional or not, but the intentional journey I've realized is that the most amazing thing is that the things that used to trigger me, bother me, get me upset, they don't even faze me anymore. They're like this little thing that's like happening and there's no reaction to it. And, one of the things my wife said to me was like, well, are you sure you're not suppressing your emotion? I'm like, no, because there's no emotion there. There's like, I witnessed the event. Like, it might be like my kids asked me a question 3 times and that would be like, stop asking me the question. Right. But now it's just like, I just turn and I answer the question 3 times and it's not a big deal. And there's no anger. There's no nothing. It's like, I guess bliss or happiness or it's just presence. It's just kind of like, I don't know how to explain it. And I feel like that's what the metaphor is talking about is like not getting rid of the problem, but elevating to the way the problem doesn't affect you as much. I'm understanding that correctly. Yeah.
100%. And honestly, like when you've gone through some experience of pain, when you surrender to that and let go of that, it kind of like burns through you and you feel it and you've processed and you've grown, you see the lesson in it, then it doesn't mean you forget, but you have forgiven. and you can witness things as an objective reality then of the past instead of an emotional, painful piece of the past. It's just a memory that has no emotional charge, and that's how you know you've let go.
Love it. I love it so much. So my next question is like, why are there people that just won't grow? Like, hold on, give me 1 second. Yeah, honey, I'm on a podcast episode. I'll be in a minute.
Hi.
Sorry.
This is parenthood. Filming an episode with kids, absolutely. And every parent listening will totally get it.
I even told Brad beforehand, I'm like, we got 50 minutes, dude. I got school pickup. And he's like, good, me too. Are you going to hang out with us? And we're going to keep all this. We're going to go with the flow. We will not edit it out. So my question is like, why, like we all know someone probably that is like, wow, this person really is not, just doesn't want to grow past this or can't face it or they just get like stuck. Using your metaphor, it's almost like they want to, even when they're aware, they're like, oh, I'm aware I do this. And then the journey of like overcoming it or healing that part of it, I think they stop at the turbulence part of your metaphor. It's like, it's getting turbulent, and then they stop and then come back down. Is that sort of what happened? Like they can't sit in the uncomfortable feelings of it, or like what's going on there for the people that just don't change and don't want to or get stuck?
Just like we grow as a way to meet some of our needs, some people's strategy for meeting their needs is to not grow. And so if we think about two of the most common needs that everybody has, number one is certainty and another is significance, right? Those are very common needs that people have, not wants, but needs. Certainty meaning the need to be able to avoid pain and gain pleasure, and significance meaning the need to feel important. Well, some people meet the need for certainty through exercising. Some people meet the need for certainty through speaking or coming up with a business idea. Let's say significance. Some people meet the need for significance through, let's say, serving 100,000 people. Some people meet the need for significance by having significant problems. Some people meet the need for certainty by proving a limiting story true over and over and over again. And so when we can have compassion for those people and just recognize that the lack of growth is just their current strategy of meeting a need,
right?
Then when we give them an alternative, a different way to meet the same need, and we help them see that they'll be A, protected, and B, important, then all of a sudden behavior starts to change. So, and this is so important because I think most people are driven by those two needs, certainty and significance. But the challenge with those two needs leading the show, instead of like something like contribution or love or growth, right, leading the show, is because if certainty is at the top of your list, then you're going to close the world in around you to feel a sense of control. And then your heart doesn't feel like it's expanding. And so you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you feel like you're dying. And if significance is at the top of your list, you're going to compare to everybody else around you and take their success to mean you're a failure. And you're always evaluating if you're enough. And so while that is true and that people will see more success in life if they elevate to being driven by other needs like growth or contribution or love, it's important that we meet them where they're at and recognize that their behavior pattern or procrastination pattern is just a strategy that they're subconsciously using to meet their needs in their life. And that's why.
That makes a lot of sense. And you said when we interact with those people, you said it's great to, and I might mess this up a little bit, but you said to make them like sort of feel safe or heard or something along those lines. Is that what you said when you interact with those types of people?
If you're in a situation where they've given you permission to coach them, then helping them to feel that a behavior change will still maintain certainty and maintain their significance, then absolutely. But if this is like your family, one of the hardest things that I've had to let go of is like, I'm the weird one in my family, right? I'm the weird one for like growing in all these things. And I used to, for so long, want to change people in my family that were driven by certainty, significance, those needs. And I recognized early on that it's not my job to change them. It's my job to love them. And that's it. And so when someone gives me permission to coach them and work with them, then absolutely. But other than that, I will just be the example of growth and love them through whatever they're facing.
Love it. Yeah, I love it. Okay. So how does this play out? I know we've kind of taken it like wide with like just life and triggers and all that stuff, but let's bring it back into like entrepreneurship and becoming a high performer or finding more success. is the process, the ruler acronym and the process there still relevant if you have like a business problem where you're not hitting the results, or how does it play out specifically towards business?
100% it still applies. And it's just in whatever context you're facing, whether it's family, business, money, health, whatever it is, if you have a different root, you're going to have a different fruit. Most people don't recognize that. Let's say that the business result you want, let's say it's $1 million business, that's the metaphor of a pear tree. Well, if you go over to an apple tree and you tape a pear to an apple tree, it doesn't matter how many pears you tape onto that apple tree, it's still an apple tree.
Right.
You need to dig up the apple tree and plant the pear tree if you really want that to happen. And so at the basis of any result you want, there is a set of beliefs, a set of values, a set of emotions that you live with consistently or are after that need to be present consistently. Doesn't mean it's there all the time. Like there are times when I still get overwhelmed or anxious or whatever it is, makes you human, but that need to be there the majority of the time for the result that you want to occur. And so it absolutely plays out in a business context. I'll give an example. Let's say that you have a goal of doing a $250,000 launch, right? Let's say that's the objective. Well, just like you said, if you're going into it from the perspective of stress or worry or attachment, where your entire being is based on the results of this launch, well, cortisol spikes. You're not as creative. Your energy is super low. And then people can smell that.
Oh, they can feel it. Yeah.
They can feel it. And then they're not going to buy from you, which leads to lower sales, which then if you are in reaction, you will allow that to impact your emotions. And so what most entrepreneurs don't recognize is that they're not missing the strategy. They probably have the right strategy at their fingertips to create a great business. But it's important to recognize that, yes, the strategy matters. You can't head east looking for a sunset. You can't put eggs in after the cake's done baking. You need the right strategy. Right. But if you have the right strategy with the wrong emotional state, set of beliefs, set of values, identity, then you're not going to apply it the right way. And so I think it takes a lot of courage to stop looking so much for the how, which is just perfectionism. Yeah. And perfection, by the way, is the lowest standard we can ever set for ourselves because it guarantees pain. You'll either, number one, tiptoe around the edges of a dream, playing not to lose instead of playing to win. You'll try not to fail where you need to fail to learn. Yeah. Second is you'll always crave the how, so you'll overstudy and you'll never implement. And third is nothing you do will ever feel like enough. And so if you change the route, respect the fact that strategies do matter. Yeah. They just matter less than the energy and beliefs and values that you're showing up with. Right. You change the route, then you will either find or correctly apply the strategy and you will get different business results. It applies in any context.
I mean, I love it. And I don't think sometimes people really grasp how important that really is. And it's like, we all had the experience of when someone walks into a room or a house and you're like instantly without them even saying a word. And sometimes without you even seeing, you're like, that person's mad. Like that person's angry.
You just know.
So yeah, you just know. You're like, whoa, it may not even be a person you just like that. There's something going on. And so if you're listening and you are thinking of that experience and that person came in and did a talk, or like they were the speaker on the stage and then pitched you something, like, are you going to buy from that person? Probably not. Cause you're like, there's something on, even if their content was good, the strategy was good, like they had a great talk, you learned something from them. There's something energetically off of that person. And it's going to be the same thing with you guys, with all of you listeners, is like, if you're not showing up for your launches and your business in those ways, and anxiety's taking over, fear's taking over, you're in for the wrong reasons, you're attached to the wrong things, you're being led by things like significance and stuff, it's going to have an effect on the performance of your business. And so, Brad, I know you have a training coming up that I want you to talk about and introduce our audience to. I know it's a 5-day challenge. What is it about and what are they going to learn?
Yeah. So, for context, I faced a really interesting situation about 5 years ago where I would be on podcasts or on stages and I would share this stuff and people were like, woohoo, this is great stuff, man. And they were super motivated and then they did nothing with it. And I was like, oh, well, that stinks. And I started to ask myself why. And it's because knowledge and knowing are very different things. Mm-hmm. You can understand all day long and read in a book, but I don't care who you are. If you read a book about swimming, you have no idea how to swim until you get in the pool. You can read a book about parenting all day long, but until you are a parent, you have no idea. Right. And so I realized that what I was doing is I was giving people knowledge, kind of like this episode. I'm giving people some great knowledge and stories, But I recognized if I wanted to create lasting change in people, I had to give them an experience where someone could show up and identify what is it they're after and what are the limitations holding them back specifically in the context of their own life, and give them a process that's been proven now with 60,000 people, a process that's proven to identify those beliefs, rip them out, replace them, and recondition them. So by the end of the 5 days, their mind is in the right direction, wired for the success that they really desire. And so that's why I created the Success Accelerator. It's a completely free 5-day challenge where in 5 days, like I mentioned, you'll identify exactly what you want, your purpose, your vision, your dreams, and then start to subtly and slowly identify what are those things, those subtle little things getting in the way of you actually crafting that. And there's a process I take people through where we're going to rip those out forever. So by the end of the 5 days, you will know exactly what you're after, exactly, and rip out all the stuff that's getting in the way so that you can make progress towards those goals. So if you want to discover how these high performers achieve their goals so much faster than all their peers with less stress, you'll learn how that's going to happen in the Success Accelerator. If you know that you're made for more and there's something getting in the way where you have this behavior that you want to change so bad, but you don't get why you haven't changed it, even though you know the right things to do, or you're doing the right things and it's still not happening. It's about changing the root, the way your mind is wired. And when you shift that, you're going to have a completely different experience. That's what we're going to do inside the Success Accelerator. It's totally free. It starts on Monday. So 10 out of 10 recommend. You're going to have a wonderful experience with the program.
I love it. And guys, even on this episode, in this conversation that I've had, I just came in with the intention of let's just have a great conversation. And I found myself having moments of clarity and little mini healings and like awareness myself. And if you had any ounce of that happening to you in this episode, I highly recommend that you guys go and you register, you sign up, because if you get immersed into it for 5 days, the shifts and the changes are going to be astronomical. They're going to be huge. So all you need to do is just go to brandonlucero.com/Brad, BRAD. So it's Brandon, BRANDON, Lucero, LUCERO.com/Brad. So go sign up, register starting soon. Brad, thank you so much for coming on, spending your time with us and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us and my audience. I appreciate it, man.
Of course, man. I'm super grateful to be here and just really appreciate the opportunity to serve your audience.
Of course. All right, guys, head over there, brandonlucero.com/Brad, get signed up, and I'll see you guys all next week. Take care. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.